this has been interesting. I've gotten lots of interesting responses to my inclusive or exclusive or. And I think one of the most interesting responses had to do with income. I think family income has to do with, so that in general higher income families tend to use both inclusive and exclusive, whereas lower income families tend to use exclusive only. Does that make sense?
What was the topic?
Oh, we were talking about the disjunct or in English.
Okay.
OR. We use it. How do you use it? How do you use that word?
Okay.
And so if we translate it, as we will later on, into the symbol, the wedge, it looks like V, so it is V, actually, right? And so, say we build a truth table around the compound proposition, any proposition, or any other proposition, right? In which case, since we have two distinct statements that each are true or false, we have four possibilities where both can be true. I think this chair. Actually, you shouldn't hate inanimate objects. It's just dumb. So both can be true. One can be true, the other one false, and vice versa. And both can be false. So I have four logical possibilities. By the way, some people do argue that you can have more than just true and false. That's kind of at the basis of chaos theory. You've ever heard of it? The idea that, by the way, chaos is not chaotic. We actually can, if you look at chaos pattern, supposedly chaotic patterns for long enough, and we can do that now with computers, we could project out, the patterns. What we discover is that chaotic patterns tend to be patterns, so that they're actually not chaotic. So they actually follow a particular order. So basically, chaos is no longer.
It doesn't mean sporadic.
You can have sporadic, but in the big picture, if you get a big enough picture, it turns out this sporadicity or the stochastic nature of the pattern turns out to be a pattern. And so you can actually, so the problem is it looks chaotic, like weather looks chaotic to us because we're so close up and we think, wow, geez, why are we getting so much snow this year? Well, if we look at the big pattern, it actually kind of fits an honest to goodness, oh, we could have predicted it had we had enough data kind of approach. But so there was a big fight over chaos and whether or not, so like for example, in a practical sense, a microwave that you could put a potato in and hit potato, right? What the microwave will do basically is check and see, is the potato done? No. Is the potato done? No. Is the potato done? No. Keep doing that until the potato is done, and then it says yes. So some people wanted to argue with the fuzzy logic chip. That's called fuzzy logic. That the fuzzy logic chip was essentially going true, false, or something else. So unknown, right? And actually, the folks that argue that no, well, it's either true or false, but you're going from moment to moment. So it's either true or false. It's not like there's true or false or some other truth possibility. So the argument was over whether or not you could have true or false and others. And I'm absolutely convinced to go with the idea that it's either true or false, true or false, true or false, true or false. Now it's true, right? It was false before. Now it's true. So the potato's done now. It wasn't before, right? So that's just an interesting argument. But so basically, you have true or false. You can't have any other possibility. I would agree with that. But if that's the case, so we have 8 possibilities for 2. By the way, if we have So n to the 1, there's only true or false. If there's n to the 2, because I have 2 statements, then I have 4 possibilities. If I have n to the 3, then I have 8 possibilities. You double that. If I have n to the 4, 16, etc., right? So the computer will know, depending on how many statements you have, and each statement is true or false, how many logical possibilities the whole thing will have. Okay, but so if we just have 2 true or false, so the inclusive use will tell us that if both of these are true, the whole thing is true. If this is true and this is false, the whole thing is true because I only need one of them. If this is false but this is true, it's still true because I only need one of them. It would only be false under the conditions where both the left and the right are false. So there's only one place where computers will determine that a disjunct is false, and that's where both the left and the right sides are false, right? But in everyday speech, a lot of people grow up in families that use or in the exclusive sense. And in the exclusive sense, that one is false, which you can't do that with computers. All the computers are programmed to accept the inclusive use. And the argument is pretty basic, actually, that if you have the inclusive use as part of your code, you can also add a statement type that says but, not both, which includes the exclusive use. But if you had the exclusive use for the meaning of the symbol, you could not use the inclusive use. So this is basically a matter of how to make a absolutely simple system that includes all logical possibilities for translation, right? So it's a pragmatic reason, right? But what's interesting, of course, is that when I asked the question, I got a lot of folks that said, oh, my family only uses it in the exclusive sense. We never use it in the inclusive sense. One person said, the only time I ever heard of the inclusive sense was in your class last class. Wow, that's amazing to me, right? Actually, I can't remember back far enough to know what my family did with it, but it seems to me that we used it in both ways. Because when I was in logic and I had this brought up, it occurred to me that, well, yeah. And I understood, yes, you could use it both ways. So it wasn't a shock to me. But I've learned since that it is a surprise to some people, and it really screws them up when you're doing, especially when we move into like if P then Q. So if we go into if P then Q, P therefore Q, that works fine for some people. But when we look at this argument, well, it turns out to be the case that so if I give Christopher a quarter and tell him to empty the trash, he empties the trash, I give him the quarter, I didn't lie to him, right? If he empties the trash and I don't give him the quarter, I lied to him. Everyone will agree with that, right? But if he doesn't empty the trash and I give him the quarter, everybody will say, no, that's totally wrong, right? Well, and obviously I shouldn't have done that, but nonetheless, he's not going to say I lied to him. And if you think about it, that's, again, the same thing. It's the inclusive use of well, we'll go over that when we get the chance. It's fun. But it indicates that there's something going on in our kind of basic understanding of our logical operators, even as common speakers of English. So when you go from one family to another, we're not just going to disagree on what a parent's rights ought to be, or whether abortion is, we're actually going to disagree over the nature of or, and how or gets used. So it's pretty interesting for me, from kind of a sociological, analytic point of view, because I'm just a weird person and I like thinking about everything. Even why that poor little girl pulled up such a little fish while the father was crunching those potato chips in the commercial. She said, dude, you're going to chase away the fish. Did you see the commercial? I think it's Doritos. Okay, so we were talking about categorical propositions. How many of you figured out things that people said, whether they're true or false, and analyzed them to figure out which statement type they were? Did any of you try that, or did you forget as soon as you left class on Wednesday? Everybody forgot, right? Did anybody hear anybody say anything true this week? Anything false? They don't pay attention? True or false? That's kind of important, right? So Trump said, you know, look what happened in Sweden last night. Sweden went ballistic. What happened in Sweden? You know, he says, well, I watched Fox News, and Fox News said, look at the crime rate in Sweden now because of all the immigrants. So I think in Trump's mind, since he was watching Fox News last night, something happened in Sweden last night.